Hey everybody, this one is about how all statutes convert rights into privileges. Copies of these documents can be found in my private group at Yahoo called Administering Your Public Servants. For a complete set of YouTube videos with private information shares, a DVD with over 50 searchable law dictionaries and other books and forums, contact me privately at engineerwin@yahoo.com. Donations to support this work are appreciated. I prefer gold or silver coin. But for the Satanist revenue officers operating in their private capacity under the Federal Tax Lien Act of 1966 as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept the IOUs, the commercial paper, the Federal Reserve notes, the PayPal gifts, the checks, the money orders, etc. Send me an email for particulars. Anyways, this is taken from Jacob A. New Law Dictionary, 1750. And it's talking about citizens of London are either freemen or such as reside and keep a family in the city, etc. And some are citizens and freemen and some are not, who have not so great privileges as the others. The citizens of London may prescribe against a statute because their liberties are reinforced by statute. In other words, the statutes are there to protect your rights. That is all. Okay? Otherwise, they have nothing to do with we the people. That's the point, okay? And this is as old as time itself. All of these statutes are a cheap imitation of common law that essentially converts rights into privileges. And this is a cite from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment in the case Diet versus Turner by this Judge H. Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court. By this means, citizens' birthrights become of no effect, and their rights are reduced to the inferior character of statutory civil rights, mere legislative privileges. Okay? And at common law, they are absolute rights. Statutes can and are changed. Statutes are ignored sometimes. And so when you get involved with a statute, it operates as a contract because of your own ignorance. Matter of fact, Mark Passio calls it ignorance, which the root word is ignore. And so you're ignoring the law. Anyways, when you get involved with these statutes, it operates as a contract, and this is a Clearfield doctrine. Governments descend to the level of a mere private corporation and take on the characteristics of a mere private citizen, where a private corporate commercial paper, which is Federal Reserve notes and securities, is concerned. For purposes of suit, such corporations and individuals are regarded as entities entirely separate from government. That's why you cannot ever, when you're dealing with these Satanist bail priests, you cannot ever deal with the Federal Reserve notes. Okay, you cannot pay their extortion because it converts it into a commercial transaction. This is Downs versus Bidwell. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? Anyways, eliminating then from the opinions of this court all expressions unnecessary to the disposition of the particular case, and gleaning therefrom the exact point decided in each, the following propositions may be considered as established. 1. That the District of Columbia and the territories are not states within the judicial clause of the Constitution giving jurisdiction in cases between citizens of different states. And so the point being is that D.C. and the territories are not states within Article 3 of the Constitution. And so therefore, there are no Article 3 courts in the District of Columbia or the territories. Number 3. That the District of Columbia and territories are states, as that word is used in treaties with foreign powers with respect to the ownership, disposition, and inheritance of property. And so that's talking about cestacate trusts, first of all, and that's also talking about, you see evidence of that in a statute, like, for example, Title VI, United States Code, which is, I think it's immigration, or public safety, I'm not sure, but anyways, certainly the border pigs deal with it. Anyways, it says in there that that it talks about the jurisdiction in the United States. It says the United States is D.C. and the states, and then it says that the states are Guam Americans, Samoa, and Puerto Rico, okay? But if you don't understand what's going on and what they're saying, you will think that the state they're talking about is Texas, and it's not. But it's because of your own ignorance that is the case. And point 4, that the territories are not within the clause of the Constitution providing for the creation of a Supreme Court and such inferior courts as Congress may see fit to establish. And that's just reaffirming what I said when I talked about paragraph 1. There are no courts in the District of Columbia and the territories. They're kangaroo courts. It's a show trial. It's a kangaroo court. It's a charade. It's a fraud. They're nothing but a bunch of pirates. Anyways, did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? This is the dissenting opinion for Down versus Bidwell, and Justice Marshall Harlan said, 2 national governments exist, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, the other to be maintained by Congress outside and independently of that instrument. So, again, did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? Why do you think that Nancy Pelosi, as Speaker of the House of Representatives, says that they have to pass legislation without reading it, okay? She'll say something like, we need to pass this act so we can see what it says. And so the point being is that's obviously for the District of Columbia and the territories. Has nothing to do with anywhere else. And so everything is under presumption. And why are there presumptions? Because we have a military government, okay? See, Texas and other American states are under a military occupation video. See, the Alberta and other Canadian states are under military occupation video. See, the martial law is here video. They get military government, a couple of martial laws, the rule of necessity and emergency, and they can get it through a bankruptcy or they can get it through a military occupation. Watch the videos. Martial law works on presumption. They presume you're one of the slaves until you defeat their presumption. In other words, you're guilty until proven innocent. Whenever the Uniform Commercial Code creates a presumption with respect to a fact or provides that a fact is presumed, the trier of fact must find the existence of the fact unless and until evidence is introduced that supports a finding of its non-existence. And that's UCC 1-206. But again, all presumptions can be defeated. And that's what my procedure is when you watch the video about estoppel certificates, you can put them into estoppel. You can defeat their presumptions. But you have to be proactive. You have to go on the attack. Their presumptions are that you're one of the slaves and you're incompetent. That's why they're representing you. That's all they have to presume. And there's documentary proof right here. This Georgia Department of Driver Services, okay, this is a sanitized letter that was sent out in 2012 by their chief counsel, and this is a 3-page letter. If you want to read the letter, you're more than welcome to. Just pause the video because I am going to just scan through it here real quick. The top part of this page is what we're going to talk about, and I have the text below. And there's the letter, the end of the letter. It's a 3-page letter, and it's signed by this Jennifer Ammons, of the General Counsel for the Georgia Department of Driver Services. And so the text that I want to bring to your attention is that the statute, and really it should say all statutes, creates a rebuttable presumption of residency for anyone who meets the following criteria. And, you know, that's all well and fine, but the point is that there's an escape clause that she puts in the letter. It says, however, no such person shall be considered a resident for purposes of this chapter unless such person is either a United States citizen or an alien with legal authorization from the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service. And so there we go. That cuts to the chase. That doesn't talk, that says that if you're not a United States citizen or an alien, then it means nothing to you, okay? And again, you have to defeat their presumption. It's a rebuttable presumption. And so you have to defeat it. They deliberately screen out their employees, their code enforcers. They want idiots. They want, that's why you see people getting murdered on TV every night by these code enforcers, Satanists. They don't want anybody that's intelligent doing these jobs. They want hired thugs. Now, that's not to say that they're all hired thugs, because many of them, once they get into the position and after maybe a few years, they start to learn what their duty is. Or maybe they'll run into somebody like me that happens to understand the law, and they go and assault me, and I break it off in their backside. But so the point being is that they want hired thugs. There's whole groups of peace officers on YouTube and on Facebook that they're called Oath Keepers. Those are guys that know the law and understand that they only have a limited jurisdiction, and they don't want to be a code enforcer. They want to be a peace officer. And so I don't want anybody to think that I'm railing on peace officers, because we need peace officers. But these people that do the hiring, they don't want peace officers. They want code enforcers. They want revenue. And they want people to go out and assault people and murder people. It's all the Roman cult. It's all about business. Anyways, so more presumptions. Do you use commercial paper? Okay, that's Federal Reserve notes for people that don't know that. Then you're a government employee. See the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. See the Federal Tax Lien Act of 1966. Did you pay a filing fee? Well, that's commercial paper. Are there only two ways to file a lawsuit? By paying a filing fee or impecuniosity. See, that's what these bail priests get in there, and they create these presumptions because when you file a lawsuit, you either pay a filing fee, or the Satanist clerk sends you this impecuniosity form to fill out, and if you don't fill that out right, then they just assault you with their U.S. citizen slave. There are only two forms of representation: a liar or pro se, which is a liar on his own behalf, okay? And I'm an attorney. But so it's either you have a liar or you're a liar on your own behalf. That's why they like to use pro se. All officers of their so-called court are foreign agents of the Roman cult. See Bar Members 1, 2, and 3, the Bar Members videos. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to click the bell next to the subscribe button so you're notified when there's a new upload. And there's the front page of my channel, and notice the arrow pointing to the bell. When you click on that, a pop-up will come up, and you have to check the box and click OK if you want to be notified about new uploads. Anyway, so it all is tied into Unidroit, okay? These people are Satanists. Unidroit stands for Unification of Private Law, which is law merchant. And the website says that 63 countries have adopted it. Okay, remember I talked about the Uniform Commercial Code? Well, Uniform Commercial Code is controlled and regulated by Unidroit. It's a Unidroit statute, which is under the United Nations, and it's designed to be automatically implemented if you look on their website. Canada and the United States have been signatories to the Unidroit statute for over 30 years. Unidroit website says nothing about Texas or Arizona, any of the American states or the Canadian provinces. Therefore, the Unidroit application is in the American, the federal jurisdiction only. Okay? And that's the point I want to make. Unidroit covers negotiable instruments, civil procedures, secured transactions, legal status of women, maintenance obligations, contracts, banking law, much more. This is their website. Let's get in a little closer. It talks about commercial contracts, cultural property, franchising. And this is another page of their website. If you notice up at the top, International Institute for the Unification of Private Law, Unidroit, okay? Leasing, security interest, transport, banking law, capital markets. There's all sorts of stuff there. Arbitration. And so if these kangaroo courts like to do arbitration, and so again, this is all coming from Unidroit. Banking law, capital markets, civil procedure, it's all coming from Unidroit. Civil liability, Unidroit. Contracts in general, cultural property. Again, these are not common law contracts. They are only law merchant contracts. So it's when you're dealing with the bankster thieves or anything related to the bankster thieves under Roman law. And so, anyways, franchising, hotel keepers, insurance, intellectual property, leasing, legal status of women, maintenance obligations, movement of persons, negotiable instruments. Okay, this all falls under Unidroit. And this is the international, Unidroit also talks about the 1955 Benelux Treaty on compulsory insurance against civil liability in respect of motor vehicles, the 1956 Convention on the Contract for the international carriage of goods by road, 1958 Convention concerning the recognition and enforcement of decisions relating to maintenance obligations towards children, and 1959 European Convention on compulsory insurance against civil liability in respect of motor vehicles, and the 1962 European Convention on the liability of hotel keepers concerning the property of their guests. And so this is all under Unidroit. And now another little diversion here. My blog is sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com. My website is sovereigntyinternational.fyi. My email address is engineerwin@yahoo.com. My YouTube profiles, I've got two of them, Sovereign Living and Sovereignty International. My Facebook community page, I deleted it due to censorship on the part of Facebook. My private group, Sovereignty International, is being deleted. My Yahoo private group is administrating your public servants, and my Google private group is administrating your public servants. The Facebook private group called Sovereignty International, I need to ban 17,000 people off of there, and that takes time. But I'm not going to allow Facebook to profit from my hard work. Anyways, follow me on Twitter, and that's at EngineerWin. Follow me on Twitter. Anyways, these are, this is again taken from the Unidroit website. You notice it talks about membership, and at the very top, membership of Unidroit is restricted to states acceding to the Unidroit statute. Okay? And so it's all under the United Nations, okay, under municipal law. And so if you look there on the left, well, I'll just a list of countries. This is only one or two. I got 2 pages out of there because it showed the countries I wanted to show. But there's 63, and looks like most of South America and Europe, really. Anyways, and elsewhere, Australia, Canada, China, Russia, and UK, and United States. And so, anyways, so there's 63 countries. All judges are actually clerks masquerading as judges. That means they're bail priests. Their black robe is their bail priest uniform. They routinely deny anything related to justice from happening because it's so good for business. They want their business. They encourage their false flag operations and agent provocateurs because it's so good for business. They encourage police state murders, assaults, kidnappings, and thefts because it's so good for business. Everything they do is a fraud and a lie. And they're Satanists, okay? That's exactly what they are, okay? So, the presumption, when there's a presumption, that means you're guilty until proven innocent, okay? That's what it's all talking about, okay? So, the presumption is that you're guilty until proven innocent, and the way you defeat their presumptions is with an affidavit. Indeed, no more than affidavits are necessary to make a prima facie case. Affidavits are commercial, they're notarized, declaration or common law. With a declaration, you have 2 to 3 witnesses, but you can also make them notarized. I like to be in their face, so I usually notarize them and call it a declaration. An affidavit or declaration is considered evidence. If done properly, you have to make statements of fact, have to avoid opinion, and avoid conclusions. And so I basically, I have a video that talks about how I do affidavits. And but the good one is on my on the subscription-based YouTube channel. Anyways, and speaking of the subscription-based YouTube channel, announcing a subscription-based YouTube channel called Sovereignty International. The recommended cost of the subscription is currently $1.99 a month because it avoids the advertising only. The only power that the New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and deception, and my agenda is to expose it for all our benefit. For that reason, there'll be very little exclusive material on that channel. I originally wanted to have exclusive material, but then after thinking about it, my agenda is to expose all these Satanists. So I don't have much exclusive material on there. I do have an Arlington private information share, and I do have that affidavit video about how I put together affidavits and how you can, I can't tell you how many people I've removed because of it. So I'm currently publishing 5 videos a week. If you can either subscribe because you want to avoid the advertising, or maybe you just want to make a donation, and it's a modest donation, but every little bit helps, and you get a whole bunch of people making a modest donation, and it can add up pretty fast. Anyways, the bottom line is some people had trouble finding the YouTube channel, and so a link to it is at the bottom. Until I get a certain number of subscribers, YouTube won't let me have a customized link, and so that's as good as it gets. And there's the front page of the channel. The link is at the top. And also people have sent me donations for $1.99, and I wasn't sure if it was a donation for $1.99 or if it was wanting me to subscribe them. And so I actually sent them an email. They didn't respond, so I guess it must have been a donation. I offered to refund it. Anyways, the point being is that I have absolutely no control over subscribers. I can't even see all of them. And so if you want to subscribe, the only way you can do it is click on the Start Free Trial button, which is the bottom arrow. YouTube is going to want probably payment information, who knows what, but that's the only way you can do it. Anyways, so back to the topic at hand. This is all coming from the Roman cult. The Death of London's Roman Empire by Lyndon H. LaRouche Jr. And this is a website called Covert Geopolitics. And that's the point I wanted to make is a lot of people are recognizing that that the Roman Empire is alive and well, and it's London is an integral part of it. Anyways, so they have to fabricate evidence of their slave, okay? That's the reason that they have to do this. And so the international law rule adopted for areas under federal legislative jurisdiction federalizes state civil law, including common law. The rule serves to federalize not only the statutory, but the common law of the state. State and federal venue discussed. The civil laws effective in an area exclusive federal jurisdiction are federal law, notwithstanding their derivation from state laws, and a cause arising under such laws may be brought in or removed to federal district court. Now, and this is actually taken from a book called The Jurisdiction Over Federal Areas Within the States, the report of the Interdepartmental Committee for the Study of Jurisdiction Over Federal Areas Within the States, Part 2, a text of the law of legislative jurisdiction submitted to the Attorney General and transmitted to the President June 1957, and it's taken from pages 158 through 165. Now, you might say that in Texas there's not many exclusive federal jurisdictions. Well, actually, all of Texas is an exclusive federal jurisdiction if you're a U.S. citizen. And this is National Mutual Insurance Company of the District of Columbia versus Tidewater Transfer Company, U.S. Supreme Court, 1948. We therefore decline to overrule the opinion of Chief Justice Marshall. We hold that the District of Columbia is not a state within Article 3 of the Constitution. In other words, in cases between citizens of the district and those of the states were not included in the catalog of controversies over which Congress could give jurisdiction to the federal courts by virtue of Article 3. See, we're back to that Downs versus Bidwell case that we talked about in the very beginning. In other words, Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington District of Columbia, and through their plenary power, nationally covers those citizens even when in one of the several states, as though the district expands for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go throughout the states of the Union. And so, again, if you're one of the D.C. U.S. citizen slaves, then you get your military tribunal, your kangaroo court, no matter where you're at. So the question is do you know who you are? This is all U.S. citizens are enemies of the state. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. So persons is the operative word here. And that's Section 1 in the 14th Amendment. And then see, the so-called 14th Amendment is unconstitutional video. It's actually, it's a revision is what it is. And so watch the video. It'll go through and explain why. Anyways, a citizen of the United States is a civilly dead entity operating as co-trustee and co-beneficiary of the public charitable trust, the constructive Sestake Trust of U.S. Inc. under the 14th Amendment, which upholds the debt of the USA and U.S. Inc. And that is a summary of 5 pages of the congressional record dated June 13th, 1967. And so every taxpayer is a Sestake Trust having sufficient interest in preventing the abuse of the trust to be recognized in the field of this court's prerogative jurisdiction. That's Henry Bollins. And now another little diversion. CubeYard.com. For great custom websites, domain names, and hostings, go to CubeYard.com. Use coupon code CY172 for 20% off your first order. CubeYard.com, your source for websites, domain names, and hosting. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. Slater's protestations to the effect that he derives no benefit from the United States government have no bearing on his legal obligation to pay income taxes. Unless the defendant can establish that he's not a citizen of the United States, the IRS possesses authority to attempt to determine his federal tax liability. And that's U.S. versus Slater. And the U.S. citizen, this is taken from the D.C. Code, located at 31 Stat 1432, Chapter 854, which is, and that's Chapter 854 in the statute, in the Book of Statutes, but it's Chapter 56, Section 1617 in the D.C. Code. Anyways, it says that the legal estate to be in the Sestake use. And so, and this is this is more of the D.C. Code, which was approved on March 3rd, 1901, located at 31 Stat 1189, and in Section 2, right on the front page there, or first page, it says, and be it further enacted that in interpretation and construction of said code, the following rules shall be observed, namely, third, the word person shall be held to apply to partnerships and corporations. And this is more D.C. Code stuff, absence of 7 years. This gives them the presumption. Remember we talked about presumptions, okay? It's all about presumptions. It's all about martial law. And Section 252 gives them the presumption that you're dead. That's the Sestake Trust. You can read it if you want to pause it, but I'm going to continue on. And this is where it's codified in the United States Code, Title 15, Section 44, definitions. Corporation shall be deemed to include any company, trust, so-called Massachusetts trust or association, incorporated or unincorporated, which is organized to carry on business for its own profit or that of its members, and has shares of capital or capital stock or certificates of interest. And it goes through the same thing, except that it says it does not have shares of capital or capital stock or certificates of interest. And so, did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? Are you in a contract with the devil? You certainly may be. Okay, do you know who you are? This is the Sestake V Act of 1666, and it says the underlying part, you can recite it as a Sestake V, that the Sestake Vs have gone beyond the sea and the reversioners can find out whether they're alive or dead. Okay, so again, this gives the right to presume, and it's kind of interesting that it's in 1666. This is in England and the UK, and it goes on. This is on page 2. This is actually just quite a short act, but anyways, it says the Sestake V remaining beyond sea for 7 years and no proof of their lives. Okay, and so I mean that's admiralty. Okay, if you're involved in Roman law, then you're at sea. And the judge in an act to direct a verdict as though the Sestake V were dead. Okay, so again, you don't have to be dead to be a Sestake V. And if you read down at the bottom in the highlighted area, the person so remaining absenting himself or dead. And so it's basically, again, This is Old English, obviously, but I mean, that's the current one that you download off the internet. And so it says there, document generated 2015, October 16th of 2015. And so again, it gives them the presumption that you're dead. And this is taken from Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 2, under the definition of mortmain. Yet still, it was found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity. Okay, that's the Roman cult, folks. For when they were driven out of all their former holds, they devised a new method of conveyance, by which the lands were granted not to themselves directly, but the nominal fiefs to the use of the religious houses, thus distinguishing between the possession and the use, and receiving the actual profits, while a season of the land remained in the nominal fief, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy. That's the Roman cult, folks. And it's still the Roman cult, folks. To be bound in conscience to account to assesticate use for the rents and emoluments of the estate. That's the taxes, folks. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts, the foundation of modern conveyancing. And so they still use the assesticate use to this day, and it is the foundation of modern conveyancing to this day, and it's the foundation of everything else too. Okay, if you don't have land, there's 3 things that's required for a sovereign. You got to have people, land, and resources. Okay, silver or gold, something like that, property. And if you don't have land, you're not sovereign. All persons, so an intermediate summary. All persons are aliens in sesticate trusts. All statutes are for regulating aliens. All statutes are international law. All courts are dealing with international law. All judges fall under the United Nations and United Nations treaties. And now another little diversion. Check out my other videos. Bankster Thieves 1, 2, and 3. Roman Cult Slave Scam Series. Bankrupt Corporate So-Called Governments. Bar Members 1 through 3. Do-It-Yourself How Not to Volunteer for the Selective Service in the Draft. Martial laws here. Do-It-Yourself No Income Tax. Do-It-Yourself No Sales Tax. Do-It-Yourself Traffic Stop. Do-It-Yourself Free Mail. Do-It-Yourself Kangaroo Courts 1 through 9. And so there are no common law offenses against the United States. Only those acts which Congress has forbidden with penalties for disobedience of its command are crimes. Okay, so again, this goes back to the fact that it's all coming from the Roman cult. And under Texas law, no act or omission is a crime unless made so by statute. Okay, the legislature may create an offense and in the same enactment provide exceptions to its application. Okay, so all of these acts are designed, they don't apply to anybody but U.S. citizens, and if you get involved in them, then you just converted your rights into privileges. That's exactly what happens. Everything is an admiralty. A writ of error doth not lie upon a sentence in admiralty, but an appeal, and that is cited in Tomlin's Law Dictionary 1835 edition under the definition of admiralty, but they're citing Book 4 of Coke's Institutes and the Laws of England, which goes back to the 1500s. Appeals are an admiralty. That's why it's called a court of appeals. It's the same thing that precipitated the War of Independence. And this is taken from the Causes and Necessities for Taking Up Arms, 1775. Statutes have been passed extending the courts of admiralty and vice-admiralty far beyond their ancient limits for depriving us of the accustomed and inestimable privilege of trial by jury in cases affecting both life and property, to supersede the course of common law, instead thereof to publish and order the use of the exercise of the law martial, and for altering fundamentally the form of government established by charter. We saw the misery to which such despotism would reduce us, the dictatorship. Okay, and that's taken from the Causes and Necessities for Taking Up Arms, 1775. Now this is just Judge H. Ellett of the Utah Supreme Court in his book called The Non-Ratification of the 14th Amendment that's associated with the case Diet versus Turner. Judge Ellett says the same thing in a slightly different way. And so what he says is, in the meantime, civil law was the form of law imposed in the Roman Empire, which was largely, if not wholly, governed by martial law rule, Equity has always been understood to follow the law. To have superior equity is to turn things on their head. This is exactly what happens when martial law is imposed. If equity is a law, then it follows its own course rather than following the common law, thereby destroying the common law and leaving what's called equity in its place. And that's why it's all satanic. Okay, because the judge gets to sit up there and play stupid, and if you don't bring up the right arguments, or you say the wrong things, or you don't follow the right procedure, they'll sell you into slavery. That's exactly what they'll do, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. A penal action is an action on a penal statute, so we're talking about penal penalty and offenses. Okay, where an action is founded entirely upon a statute and the only object is to recover a penalty or forfeiture, such action is a penal action. Okay, if you get involved in any statute, then you converted your rights into privileges. The words penal and penalty in their strict and primary sense denote a punishment, whether corporal or pecuniary, imposed and enforced by the state for a crime or offense against its laws. The noun or penalty is defined as forfeiture, or to be forfeited for non-compliance with an agreement. Okay? The words forfeit and penalty are substantially synonymous. Okay? And so, again, they get you into one of their contracts. If you get involved in one of their statutes, then you consented to their Satanism is what you did. It's all coming from the Roman cult. A penal action is one founded entirely on statute, and the only object is to recover a penalty or forfeiture imposed as a punishment for a certain specific offense, while a remedial action is one which is brought to obtain compensation or indemnity. A penal action is a civil suit brought for the recovery of a statutory forfeiture when inflicted as punishment for an offense against the public. Such actions are civil actions, on the one hand closely related to criminal prosecution, and on the other to actions for private injuries in which the party aggrieved may by statute recover punitive damages. Okay, so that's why the Satanist bail priest up there, when you ask him what the nature of this is, he'll say it's quasi-criminal. It's a civil suit. And so did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? This is Braswell versus United States, U.S. Supreme Court, citing U.S. versus White. But individuals, when acting as representatives of a collective group, cannot be said to be exercising their personal rights and duties, nor be entitled to their purely personal privileges. Rather, they assume the rights, duties, and privileges of the artificial entity or association over which they are agents or officers, and they are bound by its obligations. Okay, so when that bail priest asks you if you're the name, and you say yes, then you just agreed. Okay? You just consented. And I've heard of people going in there and saying something like, they would say, like this happened in Canada, they'd say, I'm a beneficiary of the trust with that name, and I hereby appoint you trustee, and now I demand that you settle this matter immediately. Now, are you going to perform your fiduciary duties, or do I have to sue you for breach of trust? And the clerk gets up, throws off his bail priest robe, and walks out. Yeah, that's true. I've heard of that. Anyways, did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? Whenever the Uniform Commercial Code creates a presumption with respect to a fact or provides that a fact is presumed, the trier of fact must find the existence of fact unless and until evidence is introduced that supports a finding of its non-existence. And so, again, these bail priests, you know, they are sitting there, they're being told what to do, okay? They're bought and paid for, they're clerks masquerading as judges, and they're all governed by the United Nations and the Unidroit statute. Anyways, and this is UCC 3.308. In an action with respect to an instrument, the authenticity of an authority to make each signature on the instrument are admitted unless specifically denied in the pleadings. And so the point being is that when what they do is they forge your signature onto a contract, in their little satanic religious ceremony, their commercial transaction, and then they presume that it's valid, and then they securitize it. And this is UCC 8.114. The following rules apply in an action on a certificated security against the issuer unless specifically denied in the pleadings. Each signature on the security certificate or in necessary endorsement is admitted. If the effectiveness of a signature is put in issue, the burden of establishing effectiveness is on the party claiming under the signature, but the signature is presumed to be genuine or authorized. And so, again, they forge your signature onto a contract and sell you into slavery, and they securitize it and sell it on Wall Street. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? When you got involved in that statute, when you didn't defeat their presumptions, they just assault you. These Roman cult Satanist bar member whores masquerading as a judge forges your signature onto a contract and then presumes it's authorized and authentic. And who's going to call a judge a liar? Even though he's a clerk masquerading as a judge. That's how they're populating the prisons. Carl Lentz brought up the issue of forgery against the CPS pigs when they stole his son in his successful one-page lawsuit. See the Judicial Whores video. He, the prisoner, has, as a consequence of his crime, not only forfeited his liberty, but all his personal rights except those which the law in its humanity affords him. He is, for the time being, a slave of the state. So they're selling you into slavery. That's exactly what these Satanists are doing, okay? And that's why they want to get rid of that nasty little common law problem. They want to get rid of that nasty little common law problem because they'd be put to death for doing it. Okay, if a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die, and thou shalt put evil away from among you. And that's Deuteronomy 24:7. And we, the people, need to stand up, and we need to take care of business about this, because otherwise we're going to be held accountable. International law is a subset of canon law. International law started with the Roman cult. Unidroit stands for the International Institute for the Unification of Private Law. Unidroit is located about 100 yards from the Holy See. Unidroit controls and governs the Uniform Commercial Code. Through Unidroit, the Roman cult has seized control of all courts. The Roman cult bar members are already officers of all courts. See the bar members 1, 2, and 3 videos. The United Nations is owned and operated by the Crown and their Roman cult handlers. Get us out of the UN now. See the Crown is owned and operated by the Roman cult video. See the United States is a Crown colony, and the Crown owns and operates the United Nations 1 and 2 videos. Unidroit's coming from the United Nations. See the Roman cult slave scam 1 video. The United Nations maintains the international law collection, which is also coming from the Roman cult. They're using the Roman cult's international law rule to assault us with their fraudulent, fictitious Sestake Trust U.S. citizen slave. That's exactly what's going on. We've gone through it in this presentation. And this is the Vatican's Holocaust, written by Avro Manhattan. A sensational account of the most horrifying religious massacre of the 20th century by Avro Manhattan. He lived between 1914 to 1990. Avro Manhattan was the world's foremost authority on Roman Catholicism and politics. A resident of London during World War II, he operated a radio station called Radio Freedom, broadcasting to occupied Europe. He was the author of over 20 books, including the bestseller The Vatican in World Politics, twice Book of the Month, and going through 57 editions. He was a Great Briton who risked his life daily to expose some of the darkest secrets of the papacy. His books were #1 in the Forbidden Index for the past 50 years. And then basically they're saying in 2006 it was 70 years, and since it's 2017, that means it's 80 years, I guess, eh? Anyways, the preface to the American edition. The Vatican's Holocaust is not a misnomer, an accusation, and even less a speculation. It is an historical fact. And the question I would have is how many more of these are there out there? I'll bet you there's lots of them. I mean, history is full of examples of the Roman cult murdering off whole groups of people. Rabid nationalism and religious dogmatism were his two main ingredients. During the existence of Croatia as an independent Catholic state, over 700,000 men, women, and children perished. Many were executed, tortured, died of starvation, buried alive, or were burned to death. Hundreds were forced to become Catholic. Catholic padres ran concentration camps. Catholic priests were officers of the military corps which committed such atrocities. 700,000 in a total population of a few million. Proportionately would be as if 1/3 of the USA population had been exterminated by a Catholic militia. What has been gathered in this book will vindicate the veracity of these facts. Dates, names, places, as well as photos were there to prove them. They should become known to the American public, not to foster vindictiveness, but to warn them of the danger which racialism and sectarianism, when applied with religious intolerance, can bring to any contemporary nation, whether in Europe or in the New World. This work should be assessed without prejudice as a lesson, but even more vital as a warning for future of Americans, beginning with that of the USA. And that was done by Avro Manhattan himself in 1986. And the editor's note: in armed Serbia could easily prevented this Holocaust. Thank God for the Second Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantees the right to bear arms. Freedom of religion and an armed citizenry go hand in hand. It is the only guarantee that this won't happen in the U.S. And it is the Vatican's one world government that doesn't want you to have the right to own or use any means to defend yourself. And watch my the right to keep and bear arms video. Anyways, so civil law, Roman civil law are convertible phrases. Now, I want to go back a little bit here, and I want to say, I forgot to say this, and I want to say this, that this has nothing to say about people that happen to be Catholic. There's friends of mine that happen to be Catholic, some of my best friends, and they're feeding me this information. And here's an example of where the Roman cult murdered all sorts of people who happen to be Catholic. Well, I guess they happen to be Catholic. Maybe they weren't. I don't know. But the bottom line is that they're not below murdering people that happen to be Catholic, and so people that happen to be Catholic are just as much victims of all of this as anybody else. Anyway, civil law, Roman civil law are convertible phrases meaning the same system of jurisprudence, that rule of action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established peculiarly for itself, more properly called municipal law, to distinguish it from the law of nature and from international law. And this is taken from Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. And so civil law, Roman civil law, municipal law are all convertible. And no treaties are internally. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? They cannot use the treaty power internally, but if you don't know it, that's exactly what they're doing, okay? And it's the DC, okay? It's because of U.S. citizens. If you're a state citizen, you have all the powers of the original Constitution. The government of the United States is one of limited powers. It can exercise authority over no subjects except those which have been delegated to it. Congress cannot, by legislation, enlarge the federal jurisdiction, nor can it be enlarged under the treaty-making power. And that's U.S. Supreme Court. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? But Madison insisted that just because this power is given to Congress, it did not follow that the treaty power was absolute and unlimited. The President and the Senate lacked the power to dismember the empire, for example, because the exercise of the power must be consistent with the object of the delegation. The object of treaties, in Madison's oft-repeated formulation, is the regulation of intercourse with foreign nations and is external. And that's a 2014 case, Bond versus United States. Today, is it enough to highlight some of the structural and historical evidence suggesting that the treaty power can be used to arrange intercourse with other nations, but not to regulate purely domestic affairs? And that's that same Bond versus United States case. No treaty power in United States video. Watch the video. History is clear that the first 10 amendments to the Constitution were adopted to secure certain common law rights of the people against invasion by the federal government. And so every citizen and freeman is endowed with certain rights and privileges to enjoy which no written law or statute is required. These are fundamental or natural rights recognized among all free people. If you don't have fundamental or natural rights, then you're a slave. Okay, that's what it comes down to. The people are sovereign and not bound by general words and statutes restrictive of prerogative, right, title, or interest unless expressly named. Acts of limitation do not bind the king or the people. The people have been ceded all the rights of the king, the former sovereign. And that's New York court case. Taxpayers are not state citizens. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? State citizens are the only ones living under free government whose rights are incapable of impairment by legislation or judicial decision. Incapable of impairment by legislation or judicial decision. That's Twining versus New Jersey, U.S. Supreme Court. State citizenship is a vested substantial property right, and the state has no power to divest or impair these rights. All statutes only apply to U.S. citizens. If you get mixed up in them, you just converted your rights into privileges. The state citizen is immune from any and all government attacks and procedure absent contract. Every man is independent on all laws except those prescribed by nature. He's not bound by any institutions formed by his fellow men without his consent. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? The rights of individuals are restricted only to the extent that they have been voluntarily surrendered by the citizenship to the agencies of government. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? The people are sovereign and not bound by general words and statutes restrictive of prerogative, right, title, or interest unless expressly named. Acts of limitation do not bind the king or the people. The people have been ceded all the rights of the king, the former sovereign. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? It will be admitted on all hands that with the exception of the powers granted to the states and the federal government through the constitutions, the people of the several states are unconditionally sovereign within their respective states. A sovereign is exempt from suit not because of any formal conception or obsolete theory, but on the logical and practical ground that there can be no legal right as against the authority that makes the law on which the right depends. And that's U.S. Supreme Court, Kawanakoa versus Polyblank. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? They have no authority. It would be treason for them to make a statute that controls and regulates we the people. That is called treason, okay? They have no authority to do that. Just like I don't have authority to take property from my neighbor and give it to some guy because he doesn't have any money. The government doesn't have authority either. And they have you in a contract. At the revolution, the sovereignty devolved on the people, and they are truly the sovereigns of the country. The citizens of America are equal as fellow citizens and joint tenants in the sovereignty. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? People of a state are entitled to all the rights which formerly belonged to the king by his prerogative. Watch the Do You Know Who You Are playlist. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? Nothing to do with the United Nations has anything to do with state citizens. United States participation with the United Nations only applies to U.S. citizens, the District of Columbia, and the territories. There are no real courts in the District of Columbia and the territories. There are only kangaroo courts. And a kangaroo court is a term descriptive of a sham legal proceeding in which a person's rights are totally disregarded, in which the result is a foregone conclusion because of the bias of the court or other tribunal. And that's Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition. And if you're a U.S. citizen, that's all you get is a kangaroo court. Did you give up your God-given rights for some satanic privileges? Thanks for watching. All statutes are, what they do is they convert your rights into privileges, and so you need to understand that. We need to stay away from these statutes. They do protect your rights, but they do convert your rights into privileges, and we need to be aware of that and circulate this far and wide. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.